All right, guys. So, welcome back to our second module. Obviously, those of you that are watching, we really appreciate it, especially if you're American and you've took some time away from your Thanksgiving to
Thanks
join
for
us.
ditching your families,
Yeah,
everybody,
it
on
was-
Thanksgiving just to come watch us on YouTube.
It's all about priorities, which we love to see that. So thanks for joining us, guys. We're really kicking it off here, starting with the second module, and I'm really excited about it. I said on the first day, or during the first module, this new program has given us an opportunity to explore a lot of concepts that, although we would have talked about in our regular, boot camps and other products, not really in this way. And even through the process of actually creating the content for this, I found myself having a newfound passion for the topics that I was creating, because, to be honest, I hadn't really looked at them in this sort of perspective before in a lot of ways, and so it was very exciting. So I'm excited to teach this lesson for you guys today, and yeah. So I'm not sure if there's anything we wanted to talk about before we get right into the module here. Or?
I just want to say I thought it was awesome, all the feedback we got from last week's lesson, all your personal, the inner game stuff that you guys shared. I'm going to still be giving guys feedback on Facebook. I think we're going to continue to go deeper into the limiting beliefs and things like that. They're going to keep on popping up through the course. So that unit is going to be going on all the way through. Also, I am planning on working on redoing some of those meditations. So maybe I'll get to that over the course of the weekend.
Good. And as always, you guys are doing a great job by keeping involved in the Facebook page. That's really awesome to see, especially so soon. It looks like you guys all kind of jumped in there. At least a lot of you have. And I'm loving seeing all the posts and the discussions going on in there.
Yeah.
So.
And I just say, there are some guys who haven't signed up for the Facebook feed. That's totally fine. If you don't want to share your inner game stuff in the Facebook feed, share them in the comments, and specifically share them in the comments from the past lessons so that we can go through them. But that sharing and opening up process and getting that personal feedback is an important part of the class. So I want to make sure that the guys who aren't on the Facebook group are still getting that, because it is an important part of the class. And if you can join the Facebook group. Again, the link is going to be in the previous lesson. So
Yeah, and you guys don't need to use your real Facebook account if you don't want to. We totally understand the anonymity that some of you probably require. And man, just create a fake Facebook account if you want to join in the discussion.
Yeah.
It's a really good resource, and it shouldn't be not. You shouldn't partake just because you think that your anonymity will be sacrificed. Just create a fake account and jump in. So
cool.
Good. All right, guys. So let's get started. You will notice. We had a little bit of technical error last time with our PowerPoint presentation. We had one design that didn't come in until the last minute. So the last one we had to, it wasn't the proper design. So from now on we have a uniform design for our PowerPoint. So a nice little upgrade, you'll notice, with the slides. And the focus, at least for mine, will be on those today. So I'm going to do less cutting back and forth between my beautiful face, and the focus will be more on the slides. But there's a lot of them, so we'll get right to it. All right, guys, we'll switch over. All right, the 6 C's of confidence. So like I mentioned earlier, this is something that I had been thinking about for a long time. And previously when we teach our courses, it's all based around the fact that it's about talking to women and getting attraction from women and whatnot. So looking at this from a different perspective, from the perspective of charisma, meant that I had to alter a lot of the ways that I thought about the way confidence plays out. Now, obviously, not only in the fact that it's maybe not necessarily in a bar. How do you showcase your confidence in your everyday life? And so, like I said earlier, it's been something that it's been very very interesting for me, and something I found that I had to think about this in a lot of different ways. So that's what this module is about. I've broken it down into 6 C's, which you'll see as we go here. They're obviously all starting with the letter C, and they're what I would describe as the 6 pillars of a confident and charismatic man. So I started off just with this quote by someone I really look up to, Bruce Lee. And obviously the quote's on the screen here. One will never get any more than he thinks he can get. You have what it takes. Look back and see your progress. Damn the torpedo, full speed ahead. So the idea behind this is that in a lot of ways, you're only ever going to get what you believe you can get. And I'll get into this a bit further as we go through the 6 C's here. But before anything else, before you even decide you want to learn this and you want to get better at this, there needs to be an understanding that you need to change your beliefs about yourself and what you can accomplish. Obviously, since you guys are all on this course, I think it takes a lot of courage, a lot of guts to look at yourself and say, you know what? I need to get help with this. I need to look into taking a course on this. And that's the one thing you guys all have in common. But what it really comes down to as you get further in this journey is you need to have the belief that you can achieve this. It's one thing to look for help. It's another to believe that the help can actually help you. And that's what it really takes. But we'll get into that a bit more here as we go along. Oh, hold on. There we go. All right. The first C, charm. It's a big one. I just threw up some pictures here of some classic examples of charming men, and as I've taken my journey through all of this, I think there's a famous old adage or quote that says, "I'm I'm basically the summary of all the people I've ever met," or something like that. I'm probably butchering it, but anyway, the idea behind that is that for me in any way, I've taken a lot of pieces of my personality come from studying people that I think were really, really good. And it wasn't even necessarily something that I consciously did. It was, I would research guys that I thought had a certain aspect to their personality that they just really nailed. And I would watch every video I could see of them. I'd read every book, every interview that I could find, trying to really put together what it was that enabled them to have that quality and really, really break it down. I'm not going to get into too deep into these individuals. I will mention a couple of them here, I guess, since they're already up here. The top left here, you have Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson is I think one of the more recognized guys in terms of having that sort of bad boy charm. But I mostly put that picture up for Warren Beatty. It was just bonus that Jack Nicholson was in it as well. Warren Beatty is a little bit more of an under the radar kind of guy. And I'm only 33 years old, so I mostly only saw him when he was a bit older, and for my generation. So starting when I was a kid, seeing him in Dick Tracy and in his later movies like Bulworth and whatnot. But I never saw him really in his older movies where he was more of a playboy, more of the a guy that was very, very, very suave and charming and had those types of qualities to him. But the interesting thing about Warren Beatty, and the more I read about him, was that guy was just incredibly charming. But he did it in a very interesting way. For Warren Beatty, it had a lot to do with his sense of humor, which was very, I mentioned later March to the Beat of Your Own Drum. It was very much in the spirit of that. When he was filming Dick Tracy, and he must have been in his probably maybe even late 50s, he ended up, I guess, seducing Madonna during the course of that movie, because obviously she was in it. And it takes a certain amount of skill as a 50-some-year-old dude to successfully seduce, probably the biggest pop star on the planet, who's also, I think at that time, she was probably in her early 30s, maybe even late 20s, in the early 90s. That takes some skill. So I'm not going to get too much into him, but I do recommend, trying to watch some of his older movies. I think it was like Shampoo, or what was it? There's one where he's actually a hairdresser in it. I think it's called Shampoo. Really, really awesome. He basically plays a flamboyant hairdresser. Not gay, but that flamboyant style you kind of see in the 70s because it was normal then. But ends up basically seducing every woman he meets that comes into the salon. It's a really interesting movie. Definitely recommend it. So he's one. Robert Downey Jr. down at the bottom there, that Chris and myself often get remarks that we look a lot like him. I think Chris actually looks a lot like him. I'm not sure. I don't really see myself in him, but I think he's more of a recent example that a lot of people can identify with as having that sort of charm that you just can't help but like him. And I'm not going to get too much into him because I think that he's sort of already in the public eye a lot, and you can find a lot of examples of him online, and it's very evident his sort of charisma. He improvises a lot in his movies. He has this sense of humor. He has this sort of confidence about him that you always feel like he's just one step ahead, which is, obviously something that should be admired. Now, the middle, this one's interesting. This is Ric Ocasek. If you're old enough to have listened to some, new wave pop music in the 80s, you might recognize him. He's from the Cars, the band. Now, the reason I put him up, he is one of the ugliest guys I've ever seen. And if you see this woman here in the picture with him, that's, I forget her name, it's Christina something, but she was a supermodel. And he married her, still married to her, happily married for probably 20, 30 years. And so he seduced her, obviously, he married her. But the thing is, for guys that usually say, I'm too ugly, I'm too fat, I'm too short, I have, blank physical ailment that stops me from seducing women, bullshit. I use this guy as an example, and it's not that, because a lot of guys, I use as examples, and guys are like, but he's a rock star, he was one of the biggest bands. But it doesn't matter, because he picked up a supermodel. When you're batting at that level, when you're playing in that league with supermodels, it doesn't matter that you're a rock star. Literally, it doesn't, because the supermodel can get anybody. That's the bare minimum that she needs in order to even probably, look at you. So the fact that he was in a band, although certainly maybe got her to look at him, that didn't get him to seduce her. That didn't help really at all in that regard. But he managed to do it. And I would say she was probably, at least in my opinion, one of the hottest women on the planet at that time. So that really says a lot. Check out the music video for Drive, which was their big hit in the 80s that she was actually featured in, along with him, obviously. And it kind of goes through a breakup, and they fight a lot. And in interviews, they've said, both with him and her, that was sort of the what do you call it? The way that they met, obviously, but also through doing that music video is how she really sort of fell for him. So definitely an interesting character to check out. On the right here, we have Billy Joel. Actually, before getting into Billy Joel, I'll just go to the bottom and talk about George Clooney first. Again, same with Robert Downey Jr. Very classic example of charming, but obviously he's a bit of an older guy. He probably has a few years on even Robert Downey Jr. Totally plays off the older sort of charming kind of vibe. It's no coincidence that the term Clooneying it refers to guys that just sort of stay perpetually single and play the field, and you sort of become the icon of that. Although I guess now he's married, so maybe that's come to an end. But again, another great example of sort of very classic sort of idea of charming. Always positive. Just even look at him, it makes you want to smile. One of those guys that you watch him and you're like, man, I could totally have a beer with that guy. And that's kind of what we're going for here with this charm. And then on the top, just to round this off, is Billy Joel. Always, along with Ric Ocasek, a great example of looks don't really matter. Dude was short. He was ugly. I mean, look at him. He's got a haircut like an Oompa Loompa. He's by no means someone you'd look at and be like, oh yeah, that guy definitely gets girls. Again, he was a singer. He ended up, Ric Ocasek got one of the hottest girls on the planet in the 80s, but Billy Joel has gotten one of the hottest girls on the planet basically every year from the year spanning 75 to currently. Like, he's literally dated the who's who of supermodels from that year to now. So, and again, great example. I recommend watching, there's an interview on YouTube. If you look up Billy Joel interview 1985, there's a great example of him doing an interview with Meredith Vieira, which at the time was very pretty. And she starts the interview off very professional, interviewing him like, so, Billy, tell me, how did this album come into... And basically starts asking these very journalist-style questions, and within a couple minutes, she completely cracks. She starts giggling. She just has gaga eyes for him. She's rocking back and forth. And it's really amazing to see. And it's all due to the way that he speaks, the way that he carries himself, and the way that he communicates his personality and his charm. And it's another great example, so I recommend looking at that. All right, let's continue. So, charm. I used a picture here of Errol Flynn on the left here. Pretty much the icon of not just charm, but pretty much everything related to a guy that's good with girls. The phrase "in like Flynn" came from him, and I do recommend reading his book. It's called My Wicked Wicked Ways. It's an autobiography. Very, very good book. Obviously, he's from a different time period. He was in his 20s and 30s, in the 30s and 40s, I guess, and basically was a huge cat and a huge playboy all through, up until the 50s, and I think he died at the end of the 50s. But even still, when he was, old and on his deathbed, he was still getting girls in their 20s. His book is a really good look at sort of his ideas and his personality and how he deals with situations, because it wasn't all roses for his career. A big chunk of his career, he was basically had no money and was in, had to go through some really tough times. So a great example of someone to look up to. All right. So the first point about charm: introduce yourself to everyone you expect to meet more than once in your life. So what I mean by this, and this may be one of the biggest points from this entire presentation. Anyone you expect to meet more than once in your life, whether it's a grocery store clerk, a bank teller, anyone, literally the convenience store owner, a restaurant cashier, anyone that you're probably going to see again. So it's probably maybe the bank by your house or the grocery store by your house or whatnot. Make a point to introduce yourself and get their name. And the reason you do this is because so whenever I move to a new neighborhood, I go to the grocery store, I bring my groceries to the checkout, and it doesn't matter if it's a girl or a guy or if she's older or whatever, it doesn't matter. And let's say her, she's got a name tag and it says Amanda. So I go there and I say, "Hey Amanda, how's it going? I'm Derek, nice to meet you. I actually just moved down the block, so I'm probably going to be here all the time." And obviously if she doesn't have a name tag, I'll ask her what her name is. And that might be it. So, she might be a little bit not weirded out, but a little bit taken aback by that, because obviously most of her day is just spent taking money and asking, "Did you find everything?" and "Have a nice day." So even that little bit of sort of extra mental work she has to do to continue that conversation, because it doesn't fit into the mold that she's used to, is going to take her out of that sort of robotic response. And now all of a sudden she has to, maybe for the first time that day, be herself. And you see it in their eyes when you do that. They smile, or maybe they get taken aback a little bit. But that's all it really takes the first time. Maybe you smile and you leave. All right, well, I'll see you probably in 4 days when I run out of cereal or milk. And next time you go in, remember their name. So you walk up, if it happens to be the same cashier, but you do this with all of them anyway. You say, "Amanda, how's it going?" And you smile, as if the smile kind of says, "I know you probably don't remember my name, and maybe also didn't expect me to remember yours, but I did." And she'll probably look a little bit awkward, like she doesn't remember your name. And you just say, "You don't remember my name, do you?" with a little smile. And she says, "No, it's okay, it's Derek." But you can't forget it again. Otherwise, I'm going to be I'll be really upset. And again, you're being a bit facetious there. And then the next time you go in, so again, maybe just ask her how her week was in that last interaction. The next time you go in, say your name again. "Hey, Amanda, how's it going?" She'll probably remember your name. It's like, "Hey, Derek, how are you?" And you'll notice that she'll have this big beaming smile. Every time you meet her from that point on, every time you go in there, she's probably going to light up as soon as she sees you, because she knows this is sort of a moment in her day where she gets to step outside of the monotony of her job and actually be herself. And that can be very refreshing, and that can be very, very, very positive for a lot of people that work like that. But that's not necessarily why we do it. We do it because, here's the thing, woman of your dreams, probably not going to meet her in a bar. Probably not going to meet her, online dating. It's probably going to be a girl that you walk by in your life, or maybe works at a store that you happen to visit once. And if you can go through your life doing this with everyone you meet, it starts to change who you are. It becomes your default way of talking to people. In your life, when you walk around, everywhere you go, when you talk to people, they're excited and happy to see you. That causes a big change in the way that you look at the world. And you need to start doing this now. Again, I don't want to go into too many examples here because I'm going through about 50 slides today, so I want to make sure we don't take 4 hours to do this. But if we have some time at the end, maybe I'll give you guys some examples of things that's happened to me. I've literally had women that work at these stores give their daughters to me. And I'm not even, that's literal too. I'm not even joking about that, which I'll maybe go into later if we have time. But very, very, very important. It'll literally change your life. Treat everyone as a future close and trusted friend until proven otherwise. So the default of when you meet people should be that they're going to be your future friend. Assume that you can trust them, and assume that they're going to be someone you're going to get along with. Now, obviously, this is in social situations. It doesn't mean some hobo on the street in an alley that asks you for money is someone you should treat as your new best friend. Certainly don't do that. But in social situations, or I guess even in situations where it may not be so social, like the previous ones and bank tellers and things like that, it's not like you want to get their name, their numbers and their phone numbers to call them or anything. But certainly treat them as if you would treat a close friend. And you should start doing this with everyone. You can immediately disarm people and immediately set a really, really good first impression. Look at the smile on Errol Flynn's face. There's a reason I chose this picture. It's a really good example of sort of a disarming, very, very, very soft positivity to him. As soon as you look at him, that smile, there's a hint, I guess just a hint of sort of what I call kind of the shit-eating grin, which is sort of a spirit behind the eyes, like a bit of a sexuality to it, but not enough that you would be alarmed, but enough that there maybe is a bit of bad boy in him, but he's still coming across very, very, very warm. And yeah, so that's a good example of that look. March to the beat of your own drum. We'll get into this a bit more later on, but essentially when it comes to charm, when you're talking to people, you shouldn't be thinking of what's the appropriate thing to say in this moment. That should be the last thing on your mind. It should be more about what are you feeling in that moment. I talk about this concept I call confident honesty. And the idea behind it is that when you're talking with people, you should say what's on your mind. And that is actually the best way, and we'll get into this more when we get into the next module, at least that I teach, which is on conversations. But that is the best way to never run out of things to say. As long as you're present and you're sort of, not stuck in your head, it will give you an endless amount of fodder for conversation. So march to the beat of your own drum. Again, this has a lot to do with getting inside your own head, and when you start worrying about what you should say next, and a lot of these problems that I will talk about in the next module. But for now, just understand that everything you do should be in the interest of, I guess, self-interest, of doing things because you find them interesting, and you find them, again, look at Errol Flynn's face. That's literally the look that I have on my face when I say hi to people that I never met before when I meet them. And the idea behind this is that they're a bit taken aback because people don't usually do that. But it's also very, 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 it's sort of like, oh wow, this is one of those guys that does what he wants and makes me feel comfortable because he's sort of leading the interaction in a way that I'm not really sure where it's going because this doesn't happen very often. But I trust him and he's warm, and so he seems like, again, he's marching the beat of his own drum, so I'm going to follow that beat and see where it goes. Living your life as a charming man will enable you to become one. And this goes back to the first point that I said. What you'll find is if you start doing this, you start living your life in this way, you'll start noticing some big changes. I've always said that when you're being charming and charismatic and confident, it should never be a switch. It should never be something you have to turn on. It shouldn't be like you're inside your head and you're thinking, you're insecure about all the things, negative things going on in your life, and oh, I see a girl, or oh, I got to talk to people in the office. Time to turn on the charm. That shouldn't be how it works. And it is going to be tough to get out of that because that is sort of the default that people take. But you should literally, I guess what you'll find is once you start doing this, it's going to affect the way that you approach situations and the way that you talk to people and the way that not only you talk to strangers, but the way you talk to your friends, and the way you talk to your family, the way you talk to the people that you're in relationships with. It changes who you are on a fundamental level. And people will notice. They'll look at you, or they'll talk to you and say, wow, you seem different. They may not be able to pinpoint it. They'll just sense an energy, this positivity that radiates from you. And like I said, it's not something you have to think about. It's going to happen naturally, but you have to take these steps in order to get there. So that's charm in a nutshell. Start treating everyone you meet, make a point to get to know them, make a point to talk to them, make a point to introduce yourself, treat them as a future close and trusted friend, and do what makes you happy. That's charm. All right, let's keep going. The second C, conviction. It's a nice quote by Muhammad Ali here. It's the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. We've always said exposure therapy is a great way for guys to get better. And traditionally, when we've been talking about guys to be getting better with women, and it's absolutely true. It's, to be honest, the way that I learned. I learned by failing over and over and over again, and I had a lot of bad beliefs when I started. What happened was, as I started trusting some of the advice that I was reading and some of the more risky things that I was doing, I started realizing that my beliefs were wrong. I know Chris talked about this in the last module. The truth is, the more that you're willing to put yourself in situations that could end with a positive belief change, eventually it will happen and you will change that belief. And believe me, I have a lot of experience with this. So the things, I know it's tough sometimes when you hear advice and you think, well, that maybe works for him, but it wouldn't work for me. I'm sorry to tell you, it absolutely would work for you. And that's really not so much logic telling you it can't be done. It has more to do with your own ego and insecurities, not wanting to put yourself in a position where you have to be scared or do something that you're too scared to do. So keep that in mind. All right, conviction. So I put a picture here on the left. That's Sean Connery and Tippi Hedren, I think his name is. It's from the movie Marnie. Great movie. If you want to see a great example, it's a Hitchcock film. Great example of conviction. Essentially what it's about is this woman here is I guess kind of a sociopath. She steals, she's a thief, she's a habitual liar. She has basically robbed men and has some deep psychological issues relating to her childhood and how she was abused. And basically just ruins every relationship she's ever been in, I guess maybe on purpose, or and is a terrible person. Then comes along Sean Connery, and he basically wins her over by having the conviction that he can change her, and he does. And it's a really great example of, I think, to be honest, a very realistic look, and it's totally not a movie that's like, I think people watch it nowadays and be like, oh my god, that's just chauvinistic. It's totally chauvinistic. I think he like slaps her a couple times in it and basically like abuses her and stuff. And there is some of that in it, but it's not really those parts that are the most powerful. It has more to do with the way that he talks to her, and to be honest, a lot more the more sentimental moments in it that really drive it home. And you really feel at the end that she has a very deep connection to him that literally came about from his conviction that he was going to win her over. So definitely check that out. Again, Marnie. Whoa, went back here. All right, we'll talk about the first two. Grandfather game. So if you ask your grandfather, I mean, depending how old you are, I'm 33, so if you're around my age, if you ask your grandfather or anyone that maybe got married in like the 50s or, probably the 50s or before, and you ask them, your grandparents or that couple, how did you guys meet? What you'll hear is a story that kind of sounds very similar amongst all the grandparents and amongst all these people that kind of got together in that generation. And the way that it usually goes, if you ask your grandmother, she'll say, Charles was, he saw me one day. I saw him and across the street, and he gave me the eyes, and he came up to me and he said, hey, I would love to take you for dinner. And I said, no way, absolutely not. I don't know who you are. And I rejected him, and he showed up in my house the next day because he, his mother knew my mother or whatever. And, he said, I answered the door and he said, I'm going to ask you again. I'd love to go on a date with you. And essentially, it's the story of the fact that the grandmother kept rejecting him, and the grandfather just never gave up. And if you ask the grandfather, the way that he'll tell the stories, he'll say, I saw her across the street, and I knew right then that she would be mine. And it took her, it took some convincing, but eventually I got her. That is a story of conviction, and you don't really see it anymore. And the sad thing is that it actually is still just as powerful as it always was. Having the conviction that you're going to get a girl absolutely works. And you can literally attract people and attract women with that alone. And I've done it many, 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 many times. And it really comes down to this belief that you need to have And again, this goes into the second point here, believing what you say. When you say things, you absolutely need to believe it. Now, this is going to be very hard to do if you have no reference experience of this working. So the way that I got good at this is by just doing it, just practicing it. I would go up to girls, and sometimes it just means being very forward. I talked earlier about confident honesty, and a lot of times that's how it would play out. Going up to girls and just say, "Excuse me, I just saw you from over there, and you're absolutely gorgeous." I had to say, "Hi, what's your name?" And I believe it. I believe that I'm actually not just giving her a compliment, but I'm also winning her over. And that is evident not just in the fact of how I say it, but also that little bit at the end there. When you say, "What's your name?" A lot of guys may go up to a girl and they say, "You're absolutely gorgeous." They pause. They don't say anything. What do you think she's going to say? She's going to say, "Thanks." She's going to walk away. Because you didn't really communicate anything there other than, "I think you're good looking. And I don't know what to say next. And I don't know what that means, but I'm hoping you do, so say something." Well, that's not really showing conviction. That's basically saying, "Please talk to me," which doesn't work. So even that little bit at the end there sells it a lot more. But it has more to do with your, I guess, like I said, not just the words, but your tone, the look, the way that you look at her, the way that you move, the confidence in the way you touch her, all those things. Again, we'll get into those more deeply in future modules, and some of this stuff we'll get in here a bit later in this presentation. But for now, understand that conviction is about belief, and you have to believe what you say. I'll give you guys some examples a bit later on here of some things you can watch that showcase this. But again, check out Marnie, great example. Changing the voice in your head, not "I hope I can do this," but "I know I can do this." You need to become your biggest fan. And again, this really comes down to exposure therapy and reference experience. The more you do this and the more wins you get, which will become very surprising in the beginning, but the more you do it, the more of those wins that you have as sort of a back catalog of memories to reference, the easier this is going to be and the more that you're going to believe it. It may only take, to be honest, a handful of positive interactions for you to cement a belief. I remember when I first did this, a very direct opener, which is basically, just a way to talk to a girl. I was in a bar, but I just went up to her and I said, "Excuse me, you're absolutely gorgeous. What's your name?" And I didn't think it was going to work because I didn't think that a woman could be attracted to something like that. I thought you needed to be funny. I thought you needed to show your personality. I thought you needed to get your foot in the door and talk to her for a couple minutes before any sort of attraction. And it has a lot to do with the fact that I'm a pretty average-looking guy, so I thought you needed to at least be good-looking to get instant attraction. But I was wrong. And it took one time that it worked. It wasn't the first time. One time that it worked, and I was sold because I saw it in her eyes, and I believed it. And I, in that moment, realized, wait a second. What I thought was true about attraction is absolutely false. It's not just about, obviously having a sense of humor and all those other things that I thought it was based on can help, but it doesn't really need to be that much. It can simply be a belief in your eyes that she sees. And that was mind-blowing. So I do recommend, practicing this stuff, trying it out. Say things with conviction, things you think may not work, but are true. Maybe it's how attracted you are to her, how good looking she is, how, if you're not in a nighttime environment where you can get away with the more physical compliments, maybe do something a bit more low risk. So something like, "Excuse me, there's something about you, I just had to come say hi." Okay, you could use that in the daytime. And almost it becomes a different sort of vibe already when you start using those lines, because, especially in the daytime, because women never have that happen to them in the daytime. So you can really set yourself apart. So start changing the voice. Language is really big here, by the way, guys. And this is something you need to start changing when you think about things you're doing and how you can do things. It's not, let's see if I can do that, or I hope I can do that, like I mentioned in this line. You need to start changing the language in your head to, "No, I got this." Man, most of the things I do in my life that I'm insecure about, and at least to a sense that I'm not 100% sure it's going to work. But I tell myself, you know what? I got this. I'm going to do it. And I tell myself that, and I trust myself. And more often than not, I do it. And I think it has less to do with, ability obviously comes into play here, but an almost equal part of that is how much your insecurities and your ego sets you back from really going full force with something. So don't let that hold you back. You must first convince yourself if you ever hope to convince others. And it starts, again, I said earlier, it starts with you. If you don't believe that you're the kind of guy that can say whatever it is you're saying and get away with it, then neither will she. Now, again, there's a bit of a, you might say, well, how do I start doing this? How do I practice it? If I'm not there yet, how do I practice it? Well, the truth is that if you start doing this more and more, although you may not believe it when you first start trying it until you've had an experience where they respond positively, you will end up getting it right, at some point. And whether that means the girl didn't require 100% of your belief in order to really sell her on you, or maybe it means you just happen to say it in the right way randomly, but it will happen and you will get a positive response. And that, like I said, it only takes sometimes 1, 2, maybe 3 times that it needs to happen before you absolutely cement that belief in your head. And so you need to start seeking out those experiences, and you're going to fail. I'm telling you right now, guys, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. You're going to fail, but you need to do that. It's all part of this. Even the best guys in the world still fail regularly. But you need to do it in order to get those reference experiences. All right, let's keep going. The third C, courage. This is a big one. If you guys, those of you that got the email that we sent out previously to the Charisma Decoded, would probably recognize this quote, or if you've read the book, obviously you probably recognize this quote. Brand thought about it. Can a man still be brave if he's afraid? That is the only time a man can be brave, his father told him. I thought, when I first read the book, I thought that was a really, really great way of describing courage and being brave, because that really is how it works. It's oftentimes in the moments that I'm, I guess most brave, I still have doubts. I still have fears. It's less about not having those fears and more about having control over the voice in your head that tells you whether or not to still do it. And I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, so I'll go over here. Yeah, do things despite your fear. By the way, the picture on the left here, a very popular movie from the 90s, Tombstone. Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer here. Really great scene. It is courage, and it's actually probably more conviction, to be honest. But I wanted to put it here because obviously he's a great example of a guy that appears fearless. But throughout the movie, you see that he may not be as fearless or as stone-like as he appears to be. Wyatt Earp I'm referencing here on the left. There's a great scene with him and is one of Billy Bob Thornton's, I think one of his first roles actually. Look it up on YouTube. I think if you just look up Tombstone bar scene, there's a great scene where Billy Bob Thornton plays this bully that's sort of taken over this bar by being an aggressive dickhead and basically being super aggressive to all the people in the bar and swearing at them and throwing his gun around, trying to make them think like he'll kill them or whatever. And basically Wyatt Earp comes in, notices this, and sets him straight, to put it simply. So check out the scene. It's an amazing example of courage and conviction, more I would say more so, because he absolutely believes that this guy doesn't have the balls to back up the way that he's acting. And he's absolutely right. And although it's just a scene in a movie that's been written, it does play out very similarly to a lot of scenes that I've seen happen in real life with men and women. Not so literally, but at least a lot of similarities. So check it out. Do things despite your fear. The big thing here is you have to live with your fear. It's never going to go away. Even if you think that you're somehow a coward because you have fear, or that you can't do this because you have too much, you're too scared, I'm telling you, everyone has that. It's how you deal with that fear. It's kind of I shouldn't say sad, but it's unfortunate that our generation, in Western culture, we don't really have rites of passage. In a lot of native cultures, they have these things called rites of passage, which are essentially these events you go through when you become a man. So usually it's like when you're about 14 to 16 years old. You go through a rite of passage. And in native cultures, a lot of time it's like you go out in the woods, and you gotta be out in the woods and fend for yourself for 2 weeks or however many days. Sometimes it's mutilation. Sometimes it's a whole, there's a bunch of different things they do depending on the culture. But essentially it's you go through this initiation. And when you're done, on the other end of it, you're a man. And it changes how you look at the world, how you act, how you behave, how you react, and how you deal with fear. A man doesn't succumb to fear in the sense that, he doesn't take crazy risks, but fears associated with his way of living are now things that he has to deal with, and he has to do them. So things like hunting and the things that would basically be your everyday life for a lot of these native cultures. But Western culture doesn't really have that. In a lot of generations, they've had wars. So, World War I and World War II and Vietnam and Desert Storm and the Korean War and whatnot. They sort of acted as rites of passage in a lot of ways for the soldiers. But we don't really have that in Western culture. So what you have is a lot of men that grow old and they become, man children in a lot of ways. They still think the same way they did when they were teenagers. Obviously they've matured, but the fears and the way they deal with fears and the way they deal with issues hasn't really matured that much. So it's something that, again, is unfortunate. But you have to understand that a big part of these rites of passage were essentially doing things despite your fear. So, you get sent out in the woods, you don't have, mom and dad and your tribe with you to hunt for you, to get water for you, to build a shelter for you, to survive for you, to talk to you, to make sure everything's okay. Well, now you're scared because you don't have any of those things, but you have to survive. And so you have to deal with that. So that's what this is all about. Courage, doing things despite your fear. Conquer the voice in your head. The voice that says, don't do it. You're going to get hurt. It's going to be embarrassing. They're going to laugh at you. They're going to, everyone's going to see you do this and they're going to think less of you. You're going to ruin your reputation. All these things. That is the voice in your head telling you not to do it because it's scared and it's unknown. Fear is all based on unknown, by the way. What it really comes down to is your brain can't come up with a solution to a problem that you just presented to it, and because it can't think of any solution or any examples in your past of when you've done this, it panics and it tells you not to do it. It says, don't do it. I just looked through our memory banks and there's no example of us doing this before, so I have no idea what the hell to do, so don't do it. And of course, if you live like that, you never do things that will actually get you the things that you're looking to get. And obviously that, if you're obviously on this course, that is something that you need to change. I think that's what being a man is, though. It's conquering that voice in your head. I'll get my definition of a man down a little bit lower, but that's a big part of it, is being able to tell that voice in your head, no, I'm doing this anyway. And yes, I'm scared. And yes, I literally have to force my foot to walk in front of the other one to go and do this, but I'm going to do it. And you do it. I want to be the guy who can blank. Whatever that is, you need to start living your life as that guy today. So if you want to be the guy who can talk to the hottest woman in the room, guess what? You have to start doing that now. So when you're in a bar or you're in the whatever social environment, a party or an event or something, and you see a woman that you're like, wow, oh my God, she is the most gorgeous looking woman in here. If you want to be the guy that can talk to her, you have to talk to her. That's it. You have to talk to her. And it's not about you have to seduce her or you have to win her over. That's not the point. The point is that you have to talk to her, because the guy that can get her is the guy that can talk to her. And that's what you need to do in order to become that guy. There is no, I'm going to read a book and I'm going to learn how to do this, and then all of a sudden it's going to work. That doesn't happen. What happens is, I'm going to try this. I'm going to fail at it. But now I know what it's like to try. And so now I can try again. And now I got a bit further, where it's not so awkward anymore. I've done this. And then you try again. And eventually you get it. And then it's no longer an issue. But whatever is in that blank, you need to start doing it today. And like I said, as soon as you walk over there, you've already won. Assuming you open your mouth, don't just walk over, look at her, and then beeline, but walk over to her, introduce yourself, or say, hey, I haven't met you yet. What's your name? And you already won, because you've walked over there. You've conquered the voice in your head, and I'm telling you, it feels really, really, really good. And you guys need to start doing that. I'm going to get into this more a bit later at the end of the course in terms of how we're going to look at that going forward, but just keep that in mind for now and think about what you can fill in that blank, because it's going to be different for a lot of you guys. It's not fake it till you make it, it's do it until you are it. And the idea here is that, I know those two lines sound pretty similar. What I'm really having an issue with here is the fake portion of that, which I really wanted to point out. And it's not about faking things. Whenever I would use the term fake it till you make it, and I did used to use this a lot, it wasn't about pretending to be somebody that you're not as a way to sort of get the types of reactions that person would get or the types of experiences. It was more, put yourself in the situations that the person that you would want to be would find himself in. And in that way, it's do it until you are it. So you put yourself in these situations, you think, oh, you know what, the guy that I want to be wouldn't back down here. He would go and talk to her, or he would say something to this guy, or he would, go and help this person. And so you do it because that's the guy you want to be. You have to do it. So you do it until you are it. Now you may not obviously succeed the first couple times, and I guarantee you there's going to be some interesting stories that come about from you doing these things before you are them. And some of my best stories come from that. But eventually you will become that person, and it becomes an instinct, it becomes a reaction, a gut reaction. You no longer have to think about it. The voice in your head no longer says, no, don't think about this, don't do this. It says, nah, you got this. Because your voice all of a sudden now inside your head believes that you are that person. And so you just do it. So this is my definition of a man that I mentioned earlier. It's doing what's best for your loved ones, no matter how difficult, uncomfortable, or painful it is. And this includes yourself, obviously, if you love yourself. So it's not just obviously about doing the good things, the best things for your friends or your family or whatnot. It's also doing the best things for yourself, no matter how difficult, uncomfortable, or painful it is. Now, obviously, there's a line you got to draw there. But for the most part, a lot of the things that we over-exaggerate of how difficult they are has more to do with a lack of initiating them, starting them, than the actual process of doing them. What you tend to find is that once you start doing things, these things that you kind of put up in your head that are very difficult, you find that they're a lot easier. And it was mostly the fear of not really knowing how to do it is what stopped you from doing it, not necessarily the difficulty involved in doing it. And so that should be a big eye opener for you as you go forward in this. Talking to women, to be honest, isn't that difficult. And I know that's easy maybe for me to say because I've been doing it for 10 years. But I'm telling you, when you do it right, there's a reason why that advice you got from your mom and maybe your sister or your female friends when you're younger, just be yourself, that's actually great advice because, to be honest, it really is that easy. But you need to have the right sort of beliefs in order for that to work. And if you don't, it can be very frustrating because it will absolutely not work. And that's the big difference there. Once your beliefs are in order, once you have these pillars all kind of, really, really, set properly, it really is easy. So just keep that in mind. All right, the 4C, compassion. So we got the Dalai Lama here, a nice picture of him. Whether one believes in religion or not, and whether one believes in rebirth or not, there isn't anyone who doesn't appreciate kindness and compassion. This one is an interesting one, and I think one that, to be honest, a lot of people don't talk about very much. And I think it's really important. There's this idea of macho-ness, of cockiness, that is sort of spread around as an example of confident men. And it really can't be more far from the truth. And I think what a lot of guys don't understand about what truly a confident man is that there is a lot of compassion there. I'll get into this here. I put Mr. Rogers here on the left. probably the very far end of the spectrum. If you really want to talk about someone who has a lot of compassion, he's pretty much the high watermark of what you can achieve with compassion. And I don't recommend, using him as an example of necessarily someone that you want to model in terms of all aspects of his personality, but certainly his compassion and his the way that he really understands and speaks to people is something you can totally look at and emulate. I recommend watching. There's a video on YouTube that was Mr. Rogers presented to a judge regarding it was a law that had to do with PBS in the 60s, I believe, where he was advocating, I think it was the right for people to record with VCRs or something on tapes. It was a strange issue in hindsight, but the idea was that he wanted families to be able to record shows using VCR so that they could watch it together as a family, and they were going to cut funding. It had something to do with them cutting funding for his show. Anyway, look up on YouTube this video. The speech that he gives to this hardened, New York judge, this Italian New York judge, it literally almost brings him to tears. The passion that he has, and an issue that probably, if any other person presented it, would have totally got ruled not in his favor. The judge basically ruled in his favor without even doing any sort of research into it all, just because he totally trusted Mr. Rogers. So check that video out. It's a really great video. I think that showcases what I'm trying to talk about here. So, loving, understanding, and respecting yourself, people. This starts with yourself. So I've mentioned this before, but what it really comes down to, I've always said this: if you want to get better with women, you have to actually love women. And I don't mean love what they can do for you, love their, their bodies and the pleasure that they can, create for you. But you love them as people, as personalities, as humans. And I know that it, probably sounds obvious, but I think the problem is that a lot of guys, it's one of those things that, for lack of a better term, objectification is a strong motivator for a lot of guys that come into this, you can't do that. I mean, if you want to get these pillars set correctly, and you want to be the guy that has that charm to him, you absolutely need to have a sincere love for getting to know people. And I'm not just talking about the pretty ones, all of them. And what you'll find is that the more you get to know people, and the more different aspects of their personality you find, you start to understand the way that attraction works, I guess from a female perspective. And what I mean by that is, as men, when we see a girl that we're attracted to, it's on. Like, that's it. That's all it takes. If they're good looking, then that's literally all we need. And we can go up and talk to them. They can be a bitch. They can be absolutely, really unintelligent. And it doesn't matter. We don't care, because at least, if you're the more juvenile, beliefs we have about it. So the idea that once you get to understand people and you start seeing a girl that you may look, and again, I hate using a number system, but a girl you might look at and be like, oh man, she's like a 6. Me and my friends would rate her as a 6 if we saw her in a magazine. But you go and talk to her anyway because, hey, you know what? I want to warm up. I want to just talk to people. I want to be charismatic. I want to be social. And you start talking to her, and all of a sudden, man, she's got a lot of the same interests as you. She's got a great personality. She's making you laugh. She's hilarious. Man, that 6 jumps up to an 8 really quick. And you wouldn't have known that unless you had actually gone and talked to her and gave an opportunity to understand her for more than just, what she brings to the table in terms of her looks. So this all starts with this: understanding and respecting people. I've met women that guys would say are 10s, that after talking to them, I'm like, nah, man, she's not a 10. She's like, she's like a 4 with the face of a 10. And it really does change things. And I think the guys that just get into this really, they get messed up by that, because they think that it's a competition. It's a game. They think that if they start talking to girls that are 6s, everyone looking around them is going to be like, what the heck's that guy doing? But nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. It really comes down to your own self-growth, and that's what you really got to focus on. So do it. You help those that need help because you're a good person. And it's not about white knighting. It's not about doing it to impress a girl. It's you do it because you're a good person. And the way that you help people, it can come in a lot of different forms. If someone drops something in the street or needs help, you help them. Someone needs help, lifting something, carrying something that they can't do, you do it. If it means that you need to abandon the fact that you might be able to steal a girl that you think is really hot away from your friend who is probably trying to get her too, you let him have her, because that's what you do, because that's what being a good person is and being a good friend. So it starts with this, and you really need to make this a part of your life. And again, it's not about doing it to impress people. It's about doing it to make yourself feel good, which I guess is sort of a selfish way of doing it. But the truth is that I don't know if there's any sort of form of I can't remember the word to describe doing things for the sake of doing them because they're good. I know there's a word for it. Anyway, it escapes me right now. But when it comes down to it, I think that most of the time people do things for an end goal, which I think is only human. At least make sure that the end goal is not something sinister. Make sure it's for your own self-growth, and I think that's fine. So yeah, help those that need help because you're a good person. Even when people are at their worst, there are likely understandable events at play that led to that. This has a lot to do with the way that people treat you, whom you just met. People get really sensitive to this. They think that, a woman, let's say, that upon, if you approach them and they react really negatively, they say, get away from me, I don't want to talk to you, or goodbye, they take that personally. They think, oh, what a bitch. Man, she's a terrible person. But the truth is, you have no idea why she reacted that way. I mean, maybe she is a bitch. Maybe she just treats everyone like that because who knows? I mean, maybe she's a terrible person, but even terrible people, I don't know. I don't really believe in original sin. I think that there's usually things that happen that made them like that. Maybe they had a really bad childhood. Maybe, and more than likely, maybe they just broke up with their boyfriend that night. Maybe one of their friends just, had something really terrible happen to them. They're in a bad mood. You have to understand people. Don't take it personally. If you're experiencing these situations, it's not personal. They just met you. I mean, if your best friend does it to you, then yeah, you should have a conversation with them because there's something going on there. But even if they did, your reaction probably isn't going to be, man, what a dickhead. You're probably going to be like, man, what's going on? Are you okay? And that should be your reaction when people do it. Not that she's going to open up to you, this girl you just met, but at least in your head, that should be your reaction. So normally, if I go up to a girl in a social environment, at a party or a social event, and I just say, hey, I haven't met you yet. What's your name? And she says, yeah, not interested. Bye. Okay, have a good night. And I walk away. And it doesn't faze me because I know that didn't mean anything. It's I was being social, and the fact that she didn't want any of that probably means there's something going on in her life that made her like that. Because I know that unless she's a masochist, she wouldn't go around doing that to everyone that talked to her, unless she just really liked people hating her. Which I imagine there's people out there like that, but more realistic is that something happened that led to her acting that way. So just keep that in mind. Sincerity. You speak from true emotions, and oh geez, it went back. Anyway, we'll go through with that one. But so you speak from true emotions. It's when you speak, there should be. Oh man, now it's really going forward. Anyway, yeah. So you speak from true emotions. When you speak, and this has a lot to do with your conviction, which I talked about earlier. You really need to speak from a place that has that emotional quality to it. It's not about saying things because you think she wants to hear them, or saying things because you think that it's the right thing to say, or that society, I should ask her about the weather now. That's how you have an appropriate conversation. Say what's on your mind. It doesn't matter what it is. Man, you should hear some of the things that I talk about. People don't care so much about the logic of a conversation. They care more about the sincerity of the emotions. And obviously, if it's in like a work event or something, then the socialization carries a bit more weight than the actual personalities involved. The fact that you're just being, you don't want to say anything that's could be taken out of context or could screw you over in your job or whatever. But certainly in social situations, in purely social situations, you can get away with a lot. And people respect someone who speaks the truth. if be cool, which is my next topic here, but speak from true emotions. All right, as you can see here, we got Keith Richards. If you got to think about being cool, you ain't cool. I like this quote. It's absolutely true. It's being cool is not a series of things you do. It's a state of mind. It's less about calculation and more about not giving a shit. I mean, to be honest, it's not caring. That's what real cool is. And I think that, Keith Richards can be an authority on that, since he's been not giving a shit since forever. Cool, calm, and collected. So this is the 5th C. I have a picture here on the left, Chevy Chase. Those of you, you may recognize him even if you're younger, because he's been, he's had a career for a long time, but obviously this picture's from the 70s. Those of you that are a bit older probably remember when he was on Saturday Night Live doing Weekend Update. The reason I brought him on here as a way of exploring the concept of cool, calm, and collected, there was this great, I'm a big fan of Chevy Chase, and there was this great interview that I read. You have to understand that in 1975, SNL, Saturday Night Live, first hits the air. There was nothing else like it on TV. He is the star of the show. Literally, he is the one that everyone's eyes are on, and to a large degree. He was the shining star of it. And it's interesting when you read about Chevy Chase, a lot of people talk about how he's a complete dickhead, he's an asshole, he's really hard to work with, and it absolutely makes sense when you understand where he came from and sort of this quality that he has, which has to do with cool, calm, and collected. Anyway, so this interview that I read, it was an interview with him shortly after SNL debuted, and it was obviously getting really amazing ratings, and everyone was talking about it. And they talked to him and they said, "Look, you're on Saturday Night Live, you're doing the Weekend Update, you're saying these jokes, and it's live. You're in the studio audience live studio audience. All these eyes are on you. You're looking at the cameras, and you have 25 million or however many million people watching you. How do you manage to stay so calm and so cool, and make it look so easy? And of course, not even to add to that, be absolutely hilarious as well." And you have to understand that Chevy Chase's, a lot of his comedy wasn't really in his lines. It had to do with his personality. It's the way that he said it. That's always been the case with Weekend Update, by the way. And they've flubbed it quite a bit with their different hosts. But Weekend Update's always been about delivery. Anyway, his answer, though, Chevy Chase's answer, and one that stuck with me, is this. He said, "What I do is I look into the camera and I imagine my two best friends sitting at home watching the show on the couch. And everything that I do is to make them and myself laugh." And when I read that, I was like, oh man, that is exactly the sort of mindset you have to have when you're talking with people, when you're trying to be cool. That's what cool is. Cool is going back to Keith Richards, it's not about trying to be cool. It's about just doing stuff for your own amusement and for your, obviously in this case, it'll be his friends as well. Anyway, just to go back on Chevy Chase a little bit, the reason he's a dickhead, by the way, he wasn't a guy that was a schooled comedian or actor. He literally got on the show Saturday Night Live because Lorne Michaels was in a lineup for a movie, and Chevy Chase was goofing in line, talking to his friends, making everyone in the lineup laugh hysterically. And so Lorne Michaels went up to him and hired him for the show. So the reason he's a dickhead is because Chevy Chase's entire identity is based on the fact that he's always been the funniest guy in the room. So when you put him in a room with a bunch of other funny people that maybe also think they're the funniest people in the room, it creates conflict. And that's why you have all these stories of him fighting with Bill Murray and the other members of SNL and basically everyone he's ever worked with. But great example, and he's the reason I chose that picture here. Okay, so cool, calm, and collected. Abundance mindset. We talk about this all the time. The idea behind this is that you don't need or want anything from anybody. And this sounds obvious. It sounds like, well, yeah, I should have an abundance mindset, of course. But it's not about just thinking about it. It's about believing it. And there's a big difference there. So this is going to be hard to fake. And I don't really recommend faking it necessarily, I guess. But The idea here is that having an abundance mindset is sort of the idea that the way that I did it before I actually had an abundance. And when I say abundance, I essentially mean when you're talking to a woman, you're not so worried about attracting her because you know that you got, let's say, 3 girls in your phone that are willing to come meet you at any moment. That you don't necessarily care if this one you're talking to isn't really interested in you because, you know, you have several others that are. But the way that I got around this when I first started was that what is the pain point here? What is the hurt if I don't get this girl? Well, it's that I don't get laid. Well, I don't get laid most nights, so I'm okay with that. So really, you know, it's not that big of a deal if this girl doesn't like me. Well, if I stop caring about that, that's fine. That's easy to sort of wrap my head around. Now, how do I make the conversation interesting? And now that I don't care about, you know, having her like me, well, that doesn't seem right either. I mean, if I'm trying to make it interesting, it kind of seems like that's me wanting her to like me, so I can't do that. So what do? Well, how about I just have this conversation to entertain myself? I'm going to say shit that I find really funny. And I'm going to be nice, you know, I'm going to be polite to a certain extent. I'm not going to just tease her or anything. And I learned that the hard way, by the way. When I first started, I used to get drinks thrown in my face. I used to get slapped because I didn't understand the difference. I thought, hey, abundance mindset means making fun of people, basically being a bully. And I learned the hard way that that's not how it's done. But anyway, once I started making it so that I let her in on the joke a little bit, let her know that I was the type of guy that will, on the surface, make it look like I'm throwing away the interaction, if only to say something weird or wacky or something that maybe most guys wouldn't say. But the real communication in that was that, oh, this guy can say that because he doesn't care. And if he doesn't care, that means, you know, he's probably a guy I want to talk to because he doesn't need me, which means he might be above. You know, if you're looking at it as sort of a ranking or you know, she's above my league, she's out of my rank. You know, that's what it comes across as. So having that abundance mindset. If it's early in the night, you get a lot of girls you can talk to. If it's later in the night, who cares? You know, there's always another night you can go out. It doesn't matter if this one doesn't like you. It's doing things for the sake of doing it, having that the sincere interest in getting to know people, you know, the compassion I talked about earlier. That all comes into play here as well. Being unreactive. Yeah, so here's the truth. Confident people are really unreactive. And this is another thing that guys make the mistake of. There was this interaction I saw in Toronto. I was out. I was teaching a workshop, and I was, I was winging one of the students or one of the clients, and I just overheard a guy behind me that had went up to this girl. It wasn't in my class. It was just some dude that was there. And he goes up to this girl, and I don't remember what he said. It was something maybe kind of direct, where he said, hey, you know, you're cute, I want to say hi. And she was just not having it for whatever reason. She wasn't even that rude. She was pretty polite. I think she just said something like, oh, yeah, no, sorry, I'm not interested. And man, he just laid her out. He's like, you know what? You're a fucking bitch. I just wanted to talk to you, and you're being a complete bitch. Like, you don't know me. You don't know. And so his idea, I think I could see, and I actually stopped him. So I turned around, and because again, this went against my morals as a decent person. I couldn't, and not that I was white knighting. I mostly just told him, like, look, dude, you can't. This is ridiculous. But anyway, I could tell by the look in his eyes, though, that he thought he was being a confident guy by saying that. Like, you know what? A confident guy wouldn't put up with this shit. A confident guy would tell this girl who's boss. You know, he would tell her that she's being a bitch. But that's not confidence. That's insecurity. That's the exact opposite of confidence. So this is the understanding here that you need to realize. People that react are not confident. They're insecure. And there's this idea that there's certain forms of insecurity that I think even popular culture, and certainly men, see as maybe an example of confidence when it's absolutely not. So you have to understand that. The most confident guys in the world are very unreactive. They literally won't bat an eye. You can yell at them. And I mean, maybe you've experienced this in your own life, with guys. You've ever gotten to a very, a situation with a dude where maybe, you're in his face, you're like, yeah, man, you want to go? You want to take this outside? Let's go. And a dude just doesn't flinch. And maybe he's really calm. And he's like, yeah, let's go outside. Those guys are scary, man. Those are the scariest dudes because that is actually communicating confidence, that unreactiveness. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here when I talk about unreactive. Usually when you're talking to girls will give you these little tests that they'll try to poke you to see how you react to it. Certain cultures are different. Some do it more than others. Canadian culture, it depends on the city. Toronto does it a lot. Girls usually do test quite a bit. The States is pretty similar to Canada, depending on the city. Other cultures don't do it very much at all. Scandinavian countries don't really test at all. Slavic countries, Russians test a lot more than anywhere else, and everywhere else is sort of on other ends of the spectrum. But you have to understand that when they're doing that, they're not saying I don't like you necessarily. They're saying what kind of person are you, and the way that you answer that question in the positive is to be unreactive. And being unreactive, the way that you guys, if you want, definitely go on the Facebook group and on the group on the class.charismadakota.com, and if you want to see some examples, you can maybe throw up some lines you've heard from girls, and I can definitely give you guys some responses of how you'd react to those in being in unreactive ways. But essentially, it has a lot less to do with what you say and a lot more to do with how you physically move after they do it. So sometimes it can be a look, sometimes it can be a very short answer. So a girl says, I'll give you an examples of Russian girls because they do it a lot. Why you talk to me, little man? You are very small. Why you talk to me? And I kind of look at her and kind of smile, and maybe I'll say something like, yeah, what else do you like about me besides being short? Which maybe comes across a bit cocky, but I'm being very unreactive in the way that I say it. I'm not showing any sort of emotion when I say it. Something like that. And again, they really depend on the context here, but the idea is that you just sort of smile and understand that they're actually flirting with you. And that's the way that you react, at least with your body language and your expression on your face. The words may not be that, but that's the body language and the expression. All right, let's keep going. Speak softly, carry a big stick. I don't really mean this literally. This was a quote by, I think, like Winston Churchill or something. The idea was that, you reinforce your boundaries by not having to verbally reinforce them, but when someone crosses them, you let them know right away. And then sort of that's the idea. And the reason I put this down as a point as it really comes down to how you reinforce boundaries. And sometimes that can be, boundaries are normally things that you may only really get into once you start getting into a more, I don't want to say serious relationship with a girl, but at least once you start getting really to know them, boundaries come into play. But sometimes they come up very very soon. A good example is girls, when I talk to them and they mention let's say being judgmental about other women and their ideas about sex, right? So let's say I asked them, we were talking about friends with benefits or something, for whatever reason that topic is on the board, and they say something like, oh yeah, I would never do that, I'm not that kind of girl. Okay, so that actually kind of crosses one of my boundaries a little bit, which is to say that women should not look down on women that are sexual for the sake of having fun or seeing it as something that's nothing more than what it is, which is just sex between two people that want to have fun. So I will reinforce that boundary right away. So she says something like, yeah, I'm not that kind of girl. What do you mean that kind of girl? And she says, oh, well, I don't just have sex with, anyone. I make sure I'm in a relationship. Really? I think that's ridiculous. I think, if you're younger and stuff, maybe that makes sense. But, as an adult, I think that sex is natural and 100% normal and fun. And if two people want to have sex, and, they should be all for it. I don't think people should judge that. It's none of their business. Something like that. So, again, that's not really a big stick, but it is if I'm being funny and very, lighthearted up until that point. That would come across a bit like a big stick, because all of a sudden there's a very different change in tone there, and then she'll understand. Okay, that's something. Because a lot of times girls don't necessarily say that because they believe it. To be honest, if they're in a social situation, they're trying to read you out. And trying to say, oh, is he the kind of guy that would think less of me if I said something that maybe communicated that I'm okay with very, loose relationships or situations in which people that aren't, necessarily in a relationship have sex? I better err on the side of caution and say the opposite, say that I would care. And then I set that boundary, and then now she's like, oh, okay, that's kind of how I feel too. And maybe they even say that, and they have in the past. So, yeah, you know what, I I kind of feel that way too. It's just I feel like women are so judgmental that it's hard to say it in public without, other girls hearing and judging, which I totally understand. And, I would say that as much to her. But anyway, speak softly and carry a big stick. Women are not the audience. So, again, this kind of relates to my Chevy Chase story. The idea here is that a lot of guys, when they talk to women, it's like putting on a show. They think that, you know what, I'm going to say the thing that's going to entertain them. I'm going to catch them all, like get all their attention and be this, to have this performance. And then when they don't win them over, they feel like they just got booed off the stage. It's like, your show sucks. See you later. And you're like, man, that's terrible. And the reasoning was because even if you do win them over with that sort of mindset, you're not attractive. You're what we used to call a dancing monkey. You're the guy that dances for them. You're the entertainment for the night. You're not an option. So the idea here, the change in belief you need to have is that women are not the audience. You're the audience. And the idea is that when you go up to women, you're trying to see if it's a good show, right? So you go up to women and you just basically introduce yourself and you say things that you find are true for you, and you speak from real emotion and you entertain yourself. You're the audience. If the show isn't good, you leave. So if they say, sorry, we're talking to our friends, we're going to, maybe talk to you later, bye. Okay, that show sucked. I'm going to go find a better show, right? That's the idea. So it's not a rejection. It's just, you walked into the wrong theater, or maybe you didn't like the show, so you left. And that's the idea. So you need to have that sort of approach with it. Women are not the audience. You are. You are the island in a sea of social insecurity. So this relates to this my next slide here, which I'll bring up. A lot of guys feel, excuse my very, very crude paint drawing here. There was a comic that I found, or a cartoon, that really showcased this. It's actually based on a psychological study, but I, for the life of me, could not find this image online or anywhere. So I drew it. Anyway, the idea is that most people, when they're out in social situations, have this feeling that when they speak, they're in this pit of social anxiety, in the sense that they're at the bottom of that pit there, and everyone else is above them looking down at them. And it makes it very difficult to really communicate their personality or really get outside of their head, because they, the feeling that all the eyes are on them, and it's just way too much stress. And so they go through life thinking that it's this problem that they have. That, I'm just one of those guys that's introverted. I can't deal with this. I'm just not going to speak up unless I get drunk or unless there's a really good reason to. And I'll be honest with you. I'm introverted. I've done the same tests you guys did, but I've done it before, and I know I'm an introverted person. And it's taken a lot of work for me to get over these sorts of situations. But the truth is, I'll bring up the other picture here. This is reality. Reality, and just kind of erase the one on the left here. Reality is that everyone is in their own pit looking up, thinking everybody else is looking down at them. And these people at the top here, they don't really exist, to be honest. They're just illusions. Those people in the top are actually in their own pits as well. So the idea is that we think that we're at the bottom of this pit, but the truth is that everyone feels exactly the same way. Some are better at hiding it than others. Some drink enough that they can climb out of that pit. But everyone's in that pit. Women, more so. Women are really good at putting up a good front to make it seem like they're not in the pit. But the truth is that women are more insecure than men to a large degree. And the reason why is because in social situations, there is a hell of a lot more risk on women than there is on men. Because women get judged a lot more fiercely than guys do. A guy gets really drunk, makes out with 3 girls, vomits on the floor. Your friends are going to tease you, and you're going to get made fun of a little bit for the next coming days. But it doesn't change their perception of you. It doesn't change your social standing, really. Unless you keep doing it. It's just one of the things like, he's one of the boys. But if a girl does that, if a girl gets drunk, makes out with several dudes, and pukes on the floor, her standing in her social group, or her, God forbid it was a work function or something, is forever altered. And they know that. So there's a lot more insecurity there when it comes to the way that they act in social situations. Now, the benefit they have is that they're, due to evolution, much better in social situations than we are. So they do naturally can avoid a lot of these embarrassing things. And they, naturally can be much better with words and wit and keeping on their toes in social situations to avoid embarrassment. But understand that everyone deep down, no matter what front they're putting on, they're down in that pit, the same place you are. So you need to understand that. Nobody is looking down at you. They may give the illusion of it, but really they're just as insecure, if not more so, than you are. And you need to realize that. And once you realize that, I'm telling you, it gives you a tremendous amount of power. And I'm not talking power in the sense that, you can put everyone in their place and they can be in the pit. If anything, it allows you to help them out of their pit. And everyone can just sort of climb out and everyone can be happy on an equal ground, equal level. And that's honestly what it usually comes down to. There might be situations where you talk to a woman and, there's a little game of back and forth that happens with those tests that she gives. She says, "Why are you talking to me?" You know what? Me and you would never get along because I would never take your shit and you would never take mine. And we'd probably fight all the time. Probably really good makeup sex though. Okay, so that's a pretty, I wouldn't use that line outside of a club or anything, but that's a line that would probably meet you guys on the same level, right? Because you're not saying, "Hey, you're, being rude or you're a bitch or anything." You're saying, "Yeah, you know what? You are, but I like that." And because I'm kind of a dick too. And now you've created equal footing. Anyway, this is based on a psychological study, so it's an absolutely true sort of psychological problem that a lot of people have that I think this illustrates quite well. All right, the last one. Sorry we're running late here, guys. I really overdid it with this one. I think I had like 50 slides or something. So we'll get through the rest here. There's not too much left. Okay, so it's consistency. Getting an audience is hard. Sustaining an audience is hard. It demands a consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. Bruce Springsteen. Replace getting an audience with getting a relationship or winning over a woman, and the quote is still 100% correct. And that's sort of the idea of consistency. And I like how he put it, consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. It's not about what you think and what you believe. It's also about how you take action on those beliefs. So I put a picture of Ringo Starr here. You notice there's a bit of a musical theme to a lot of these pictures, but I put him because I was trying to think of a great picture for consistency. And Ringo Starr represents consistency in the most literal sense. A lot of people, there's that joke, Ringo Starr isn't even the best drummer in the Beatles or whatever that some comedian said, or people falsely attributed John Lennon or whatever. But the truth is that Ringo Starr was a great drummer. And one thing that he had, that he did really well more than other drummers was his consistency. He was like a human metronome. He was always, his timing was really, really, really good. And that was his big strength. He was the glue that held the Beatles together. And they did a lot of different styles of music. So the fact that he was able to keep up with all that, and a lot of the stuff that he did in the offbeats and things were really interesting. So he's a really good example of just, in the most literal sense, consistency. Your word is important. When you say you will do something, you do it. Very, very important. This is something I think that's been lost on our current generation, or maybe the last few generations. Our word isn't as strong as it used to be, at least for a lot of people. We tend to say what we think is popular, what we think is right. We don't speak from our true emotions as much because we're scared we're going to offend someone. We're scared that what we say is going to be picked apart or put on Facebook or whatever else. But it's really important to have when you say something, to follow through. And if you're not going to, then don't say it. And this, a big part of this is with relationships, by the way. When you say that something's going to happen, you make sure it does. And a woman needs to believe that. A woman, one of the big things they look for with a guy is that consistency. Are you the guy that's there, that shows up, that can keep his word, that when he says he's going to do something, he does it? That's a massive part of any woman that's looking at a guy that she wants to be with long term. And it starts from the very beginning. You need to make sure that you have a strong sense of self. You're not the guy that just agrees with her because you want her to think that you're someone that has a lot in common with her. Just, the guys that automatically, no matter what they say, like, oh yeah, no, totally, I'm exactly the same way, yeah. Don't be that guy. Don't be afraid to disagree with her. Don't be afraid to have an opinion on things that, I tend to stay away from things that are really polarizing. Don't necessarily get into politics or, what you think about abortion and stuff when you're in the bar. But certainly in a very social way, having strong opinions and of what you think, how socially you should interact with people and what things you can get away with saying, you should have very strong beliefs about that, because you shouldn't be saying things that you think you can't get away with. Your boundaries are set in stone and enforced when encroached upon. This kind of goes with what I was saying earlier. In fact, it absolutely does. Again, boundaries. You need to define what your boundaries are, and that's something that's personal to you. Maybe it's, and obviously, some guys are like, oh, my boundary is that women can never tease me, and that's a stupid boundary to have, because women tease all the time, and often they do it in jest and they do it as a way of flirting. So if you take that too literally, you're just going to end up being a complete dickhead to people. So make sure your boundaries are things that are, socially acceptable boundaries to a certain extent, and they are not just going to get you in a bunch of, trouble and problems. But you need to really set in stone what those boundaries are, and like I said, enforce them when they're encroached upon. You do not engage in behavior or actions that go against your morals and values, no matter how tempting. And again, that's going to be different depending on who you are and what you're like. Some examples of these things would be things like you don't hit on the girl that your friend is trying to get, even if you and literally when I say friend, I mean even a dude I just met. That if it's like a friend of a friend, if he's just some dude that I don't even know who he is, okay, whatever, I don't care. But if it's a guy that is in my friend group, or that I see as someone that is a part of my friend group or whatever, then yeah, that's his girl. And I'm going to do things to help him, but by no means am I going to at all try to take that girl away, unless it's a situation maybe like she's really into me and he doesn't really care so much and I get his okay or something. That might happen. But you don't do that. Same with like going after ex-girlfriends of your friends, things like that. Again, unless you get explicit, and it has to be explicit, because sometimes dudes will be like, yeah, I don't care, but really they do. I usually just have a rule of you just never do it. Things like that. You just don't do it. You don't hit on girls that are drunk out of their minds. Like, you don't try to make out with them and stuff like that. Really, really, really weak. So avoid that sort of stuff. You don't necessarily get in fights just to get in fights. Things like that. So these are all my personal ones. I hope you guys have ones that are similar, if not the same. But again, these will be defined by yourselves, at least when they get past the more obvious ones. All right, so that was the end of the 6 C's. We've gone about an hour and a half here. So the homework now. On the left here, again, another picture of Al Swearingen, a character from the show Deadwood. Ian McShane is the actor that plays him. Really great character, great show. I recommend watching Deadwood. There's 2 characters in there that really show, courage, conviction with Swearingen times a million. That guy is literally a walking piece of conviction. I don't know how to describe that. Anyway, but the show is Deadwood. It's downloaded. There's like, I don't even know, 4 seasons with like 20 episodes an hour long. You could literally watch it nonstop and live in Deadwood for like a week or 2 weeks binging it if you wanted to. Really, really great show though if you want to see examples of courage and conviction. So check that out. So let's go over your homework. I want to be the guy who blank. I want you to create 5 of these and live by them starting today. And I want you guys to share these, if you're willing to, on the Facebook group and on the group in the class group for the Charisma Decoded class. I'd like to see these. I want you guys to share them, talk about them. They're going to be different. Some maybe a lot of them will be the same for you guys. The one that I use, or the example I use, I want to be the guy that can talk to the hottest girl in the room. I think is a great one that all of you guys should have. But what are the other ones? I want you to create 5 of these if you can. Share some of them on the Facebook group. I know sometimes even coming up with 5 can be difficult, but I want you to create those, and you need to start living them today. That means anytime you recognize you're in a situation in which you can be that guy, you need to be that guy. You got to start doing it. So I want to hear about these. Start introducing yourself to every person you know you'll meet again. I want you to post stories about this in the group. So again, this is the thing I mentioned in the first part of this course. Talking to cashiers, talking to bank tellers, talking to people in convenience stores, talking to people in the restaurants, the waitresses. If you think you're going to see them again, get their name. Introduce yourself. Start having an interaction with them. When you see them again, remember their name. Talk to them. Start telling me stories about this. I want to hear you guys' stories. I'm telling you, I've gotten free things. I've gotten discounts. I've gotten free meals. I've gotten women. Like I said, maybe I'll post the story in the Facebook group. But it's literally a restaurant owner. I'll tell you the story. It's really short. I'll make it really short. It was a restaurant. She was from Egypt. Her family moved there. I went in, introduced myself, came back. I would eat shawarma there and falafel all the time. Got to know her and her husband and her sister and her cousin that all lived in this building and ran the restaurant. 6 months of doing this. One day she takes me aside. She's like, "Hey, Derek, my daughter's coming from Egypt and she doesn't know anyone. She's about your age. Do you think you could, take her out and introduce her to your friends?" So, yeah, for sure. So I did. We ended up dating. Eventually she had to go back to Egypt, so it didn't work out. But just goes to show you, women will literally give you their daughters if you make a point of getting to know people and becoming a real person to them. You also become a part of your community. Very, very important. Start doing that today. Research the videos, films, books, and people I mentioned in this presentation. In no specific order, that was Tao Jeet Kune Do, which is the book by Bruce Lee. Not so much for the physical martial arts aspect of it, but there was a lot of really great sort of Taoist teachings in the beginning that I thought are very, very good. I think like the first 15 pages or 20 pages are all these quotes by Bruce Lee and things he stole from Taoist and Taoist scriptures and things that are very interesting. I do recommend checking that out. My Wicked Wicked Ways is the book by Errol Flynn, so check that out if you have time. The movies were Marnie and Tombstone. So Marnie is the one with Sean Connery with Conviction, Tombstone as well. A good showcase of conviction and confidence. Mr. Rogers, the video on YouTube that's Mr. Rogers Court. I think you're probably looking up at that, or Mr. Rogers, I think it's just Court or Judge. I think might bring it up. And the show Deadwood. So that's it. That's your homework. So 3 things. A little bit less homework than I think Chris gave last week, but nonetheless, you got to read like several books and watch movies and things, so it'll probably take you a while. By no means does this have to be completed this week, guys. I'd like you to start on this, obviously, especially with the first 2. But the last one, obviously, can something you can come back to throughout the course if you want to get some more learning examples. So I'm going to open this up to the chat now, guys. If you guys have any questions, I know we ran late. Again, I apologize about that. I don't think all our modules will run this long. This is just something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I wanted to jump into the module with a bang here, so I purposely put a lot of thought into these things. So if you have any questions, we'll answer questions for a little bit, and you can check those out. So Andrew Brenton said, I just put some of the clips on Facebook page. Great. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Andrew. That's very helpful. So check those out. There was also the Billy Joel clip I mentioned, the interview in 1985, that is a good one as well. And to be honest, any of the interviews with any of those people that I use as classic examples of charming are great pieces of video to study because you can get a lot out of those. Any other questions? I don't know if Chris is still around, but he can jump back in here too if he wants to answer some of them. Any thoughts about confidence going out alone? Yes! I have a lot of ideas about that. I used to do that for like 7 or 8 months. 4 nights a week. Went out by myself. Here's the trick. You go to places, one, that you're comfortable with. That means, it doesn't mean being like a barfly and going to the same place every day. What it does mean is that go to a place you've been to before. Start using this, that first piece or second piece of the homework here. Get to know the people that work there. Introduce yourself to the bartenders. Get their names. When you go in, here's how I did it when I was out alone. I go in, I go to the bar, I get a drink. It doesn't have to be an alcoholic drink if you don't drink. It just needs to be something I can hold in a glass. Talk to the bartender, ask them how the night's going, if it's going to be busy that night. Then I move to people around me, maybe even at the bar, if they're sitting beside me. It can be guys, doesn't matter. Talk to them a little bit. Easiest way to talk to guys, talk about girls, talk about games, so whether it's video games or sports, and talk about drinking. Any of those 3 you can talk to guys about. They love that shit. And then I would start talking to easy groups of people. So these would be girls that maybe aren't the prettiest girls in the place, but they're standing around and looking for a guy to talk to. Go and talk to them. Again, very easy conversations. So something like, you guys look badass. I wanted to come say hi to you guys. What's your guys' story tonight? Are you guys all, is it girls' night out? What's going on? Talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes. Then usually at a crescendo, I'll say, all right, look, I gotta find my friends. They're in here somewhere. Are you guys sticking around for a while? Okay, cool. I'm gonna come find you guys in a bit. All right, it was nice meeting you. All right, see you later. Go and talk to another group of people. Walk away from them so they don't see you necessarily doing it. So try to find a place that's big enough. You go do it again to another group, and you keep doing that. Talk 5-10 minutes. Now it's 11:30, 12 o'clock, let's say. You go back to the original groups, if you see them anyway. Reopen them. Hey, you guys again. How's it going? So how many guys have hit on you since I last talked to you? Any good lines I used? Now all of a sudden you start becoming the guy that starts talking to everyone in the place. You talk to the other groups, and if there's a lot of guys think, oh, what if they know that I'm there alone? I'm telling you, they won't. In fact, they'll probably think you know a lot of people there because they're going to see you talking to everyone. And you can merge groups, take girls that you're talking to, and be like, you know what, you guys gotta come meet my friends over here, and you take them and you introduce them to another group you talked to earlier, and you keep doing that. Usually by the time 1:30 to 2 a.m. rolls around, you have several options of girls, maybe 2 or 3 options that you think are very solid that you want to maybe get a number and start looking at, going a bit further than a friendly conversation with. That's how I did it, and it worked every night I went out. You have to make sure that you keep. I always used to tell myself, do at least 5 open, talk to at least 5 groups of people before I would decide to leave. Sometimes you just have bad nights. You're like, I cannot do this tonight. I'm just totally not feeling it. Make yourself do 5, and usually by the end of the 5, you're feeling good. And if not, you just go home, and at least you didn't waste a night. But that's it. And then what else we got here? Can you give an example of disagreeing with a woman without being negative or argumentative? I mean, that has more to do with tone than what you're actually saying. And sometimes if it's a really hot topic, you may just want to concede a little bit, or at least agree to disagree, and then move on. There's no sense beating a dead horse. But if you're looking for an example of disagreeing without being negative or argumentative, I mean, never be argumentative. That's, with someone you just met, is never a good idea. Negative, again, you don't want to really be negative. If a girl says something like, again, let's say it's the thing with, to be honest, I use examples that come up quite a bit, which is, usually girls having issues about sex or relationships, things like that. Sometimes they'll say like, oh yeah, I can't believe like guys can just come up to girls and like hit on them and like expect us to be nice to them. Like, why? I don't know you. Why should I talk to you? I'm like, yeah, I totally get that. That's, you realize the exact thing what's going on right here though, right? And so I might tease them about that. And then they may say like, no, you're cool though. I don't mind you hitting on me. And I'm like, all right, good. Well, as long as you understand I'm hitting on you, that's perfect. So it has more to do with, I don't know if that's even a great example, but to be honest, I'll never get into a place where I'm going to argue with them unless it's something that I know I can win them over. And if I know that I can't win them over, I usually won't even try, because what's the point? Either we're going to argue and she's not going to be a girl I'm going to get along with or that I'm interested in, or I'm going to say nothing and maybe find myself getting involved with a girl that I already know I have a huge disagreement, a fundamental disagreement with over something maybe that's important, which I wouldn't do. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. Funny, going out alone and showing up. Oh, sorry. Funny, limiting belief just popped up that I don't think that's possible. I'm not sure what that means, Ross. Yeah, if you can expand on that, Ross, I'm not sure what that means. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong. Funny, limiting belief just popped up that I don't think that's possible.
So he's referring to something you were saying.
Oh, okay. All right. Makes more sense in context. Okay, good. Even going out alone and showing up's courage, absolutely right. It is. And to be honest, the hardest part of going out alone is leaving your house. And the next hardest part is going into the place. And once you can do that, you'll find that it gets easier. How do you respond when a girl tells you she has a boyfriend? Is that a test, or is she not interested? There are 3 reasons why a girl will tell you she has a boyfriend. 1 is that she's lying, and she's saying that because she doesn't want you to think maybe she's single, or she doesn't like you, I guess, and she's using that as an excuse to make you go away. You can usually tell the difference by the way in which they say it. 2 is she does have a boyfriend, but it's not like going well. So she has a boyfriend, but it's like maybe not serious. And the 3rd is she has a boyfriend and she's absolutely in love with them and they're going to get married. 2 of those out of 3 are situations in which you could still provided you say the right thing and do the right thing, you could still win her over. So it's not bad. So normally when a girl says I have a boyfriend, the first thing I say is, I usually just say something like, yeah, girls like you always have boyfriends though. Is this guy like, you gonna marry this dude? Like, how long have you been seeing him for? And then that usually gives you the real answer. So she's like, well, we just started dating and it's kind of long distance right now. All right, cool. So you got like a fuck buddy then. She's like, whoa. And then whenever the conversation changes, now it goes into not about a boyfriend, but about who she's actually, what's really going on. And or maybe she says, yeah, we've been seeing each other for 4 years and I think he's going to propose soon. Okay, well, I'm not going to hit on her anymore at that point. But so that's usually the way that I go about it, responding when they say that. And to be honest, you can make friends just because they have a boyfriend doesn't mean you'd be like, oh, check please, or walk away. Because those girls, I won't flirt with them too hard, but I'll still be friendly with them and be absolutely nice with them because guess what? They usually have hot friends. And those hot friends are usually not necessarily going out to pick up like groups of single girls because they're with the girl that has a boyfriend, which means they usually got to stick with her. So if you can win the friend that has a boyfriend over and get into their group, often the friend that's not single knows that their friends probably don't get many opportunities to talk to cool dudes. So she's going to set you up, and it can be a really great situation. So keep that in mind. So Ross just clarified here, when you were talking about merging groups when you were out, alone, what are some of the strategies you've used to conquer the voice in your head? I focus on the external. And I do this thing that I call what do I call it? Oh, I don't know the word for it. A state reset. And the way that I do it is I start focusing on external emotions. It's basically using the non-logical part of my brain. So I focus on sense, I focus on, like smells, colors, noises, visuals, sounds, I start focusing on, how much fun everyone is having in the venue that I'm in, the look on my friends' faces, the taste of my drink, the flow of a woman's dress, the smell of her, the colors in the room, the sound of the music, how much fun everyone is having. And I force a smile on my face and I think, you know what? I'm 33 years old, reasonably good health as far as I know. There's a time when I'm 65, I'm going to look back on this and feel like, you know what? These were the best days of my life. I should enjoy this in the moment. And I take a deep breath and I just tell myself, man, tonight's going to be awesome. I can't wait to just have fun with my friends and, get into adventures. And as soon as I say that to myself and then I look at my friends and I try to get an emotional reaction out of them. So I touch on the shoulder like, man, it's so good to be out with you guys. And I share that positive emotion and then they give it back to me if they're good friends and they know what's up. And this is something you'll find all the instructors do this and all my best friends do it because we understand that. You can't be down in the dumps, in the swamps of sadness, as I say, when you're out. It's not going to help you. That inner voice is only going to stop you. Have you ever listened to that voice and it's convinced you to do something? Like, have you ever stopped and you're like, oh, wait a sec, what am I going to say? And inner voice is like, oh, yeah, let's think about this. Oh, I know, you should say this. This is the perfect thing. You're right, inner voice. Now I feel way more confident. Has that ever happened? No, it never happens. Your voice just comes up with more reasons as to why you shouldn't do something. So don't listen to it. He's a shithead. And you need to start seeing him like that. The good news is that eventually you'll change your inner voice, and your inner voice will have a lot more in common with your true voice, I guess, or the voice of your aspirations. So keep that in mind. But yeah, it mostly comes down to, instead of arguing with it, just shut it out. Focus on the emotions. Focus on the present and the positive. Definitely going into a place is anxiety provoking. Yeah, definitely it is. Look, the truth is, whether or not something gives you anxiety is entirely up to you. And obviously, if you're maybe introverted or you're going alone, it can be tough. But you have to just look at it one step at a time. I always use the example of doing dishes. I hated doing dishes, and I'd look at a big pile of dishes, and I think, I don't want to do this big pile of dishes because I'm thinking about doing all the dishes. But if I tell myself, you know what? You don't have to go over there and do all the dishes. Just walk over there, play with the water a little bit, spray a couple dirty plates. And I'd go and do that, and I'd spray a couple of them. And then, once I'm there, I'm like, well, I gotta wash a dish. I wash a dish, and then I wash all of them. And it's no big deal because I'm already in there doing it. It's the same with going into a club. The idea of going into a club and thinking, oh, I have 2 hours or 4 hours of socialization that I don't know how I'm going to do. You're seeing everything at once. Don't do that. Take it one step at a time. You're not going into a club to talk to girls for 4 hours. You're literally taking 20 steps past the door, and then you're going to take 20 more to the bar. And then you're going to say a dozen words to the bartender and get a drink. And you just got to take it step by step. So Ranveer says, anyone looking for wings in Toronto? He's good to go. Chris says, it's so funny because I prefer to go it alone. I feel like others can hold me back at time or I get wasted. Yeah, man, me too. That's why I went out alone. My friends never wanted to go out with me because going out with me sucked. Because they'd stand around, talk to each other, and I'd bounce around the room and talk to girls. It was a very antisocial experience for them. So that's why I went out alone, because it would just piss them off. They're like, it'd be more like me saying, hey guys, want to come out to a bar and watch me talk to girls? Which, to be honest, actually was a lot of them they were totally okay with. But eventually it gets old. So yeah. Darren says, I was out in a dance setting last night and it was pretty cramped. I could not get myself to touch the girl in front of me. My inner voice was telling me to just dance. Here, by the way, I'm going to actually go back to so you guys can see me here. Myself and Chris are here.
Yo!
Still here? Yeah, we've got Mike still going. Yeah. I want to touch, but the inner voice says I'll be creepy. How do I go about with that? So that's a limiting belief. Chris talked about those last week, I believe. The idea with touch, we're going to get into touch, one of the later modules. So we'll explain exactly how that works, how you flirt, how you physically escalate with a girl. So I'm not going to jump too far ahead of that.
I mean, I think the secret is some touch is creepy, and other ways of touching women is not. And you've got to get a good perspective and a good schema for what is appropriate. And chances are it's being much more bold than what you think. And so a good way to start would be to watch the other guys in the club around you. See how they're touching the women they're close with, they're familiar with, and you know that is at least you can definitely get away with that. In fact, you can get away with a fair bit more.
I'll tell you this: every kind of touch that you think is creepy is absolutely creepy. Every kind of touch, but there are lots of touches that you think are not. There's a lot of touches you can get away with that you may think are creepy that are not creepy at all, depending on how you do them in context.
Ultimately, the thing is, if she likes you, you can get away with all. You can. I mean, you're not getting away with anything. If she likes you, she enjoys it, and if she doesn't like you, there's the most gentle, friendly touch is going to be perceived negatively. So the secret is creating that attraction, and then once you have attraction, then being bold and not being afraid to move things forward. Mm-hmm. But you have to get that interest first. That's the tough part, really.
Yeah. All right. Cool, guys. Well, I think we'll probably end it there because we're running very late right now. But thanks a lot for joining the module again today, guys. And like I said, jump on the Facebook group, and obviously starting with the homework and things like that. If you have any questions at all, you can post on there, as well as the Charisma Decoded program website.
We have one guy who commented just here. He says, I was in a situation where I could tell that she wanted me to, but I waited too long. And here's the other thing with touch. It's okay to move a little bit too far, listen to her reaction, and you either move back, you apologize. It was way better to be a little bit too bold, especially if you get that feeling she likes you. It's way better to be a little bit too bold and to make a move and then go, oh, all right, is it too early? All right, I'll try again later this evening. And it's way better to do that than it is to not try at all, because she does expect you to make a move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
you're not going to give you an invitation.
No, and if you wait too long, that's a surefire way to kill it. And he mentioned kiss specifically. Look, man, if you feel even a sense, a little bit like I think I might be able to kiss her. That means you can, essentially.
If you're on a date and it's going well, kiss her. Worst case, usually the worst thing that happens is she goes later. She gives you a not yet, not a get lost. Oh my gosh, how could you imagine that on a date?
Yeah.
might be interested in
But yeah, be realistic. I mean, if you're like a work function and you meet a girl and you're like, I think I can kiss her. Like, don't do that.
I'm talking about dates.
Yeah, we're talking about dates and situations in which there's been enough conversation and communication that a kiss would be something that would be expected. Don't be doing it on first impressions in the job or anything. Cool.
First impressions on the job.
Yeah. And
It's like
in
the
the
job
interview. In the interview.
She was asking me some very deep questions,
Yes,
and I just felt like it was really appropriate.
There was a strong connection. Yeah, don't do that. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for the module or for attending the module, and we will see you guys. So the next module is going to be on this Monday coming up.
Monday,
which is Chris's module.
Yeah,
and
it's going to be mine. It's going to be the secret of attraction. We're going to go into the essence of attraction in a lot of depth. It's really, really, really. This is the stuff that I'm going to teach tomorrow is actually the answer to everything. You're not going to get all of it. You're not, but it goes really, really deep. It is the secret of attraction, and yeah, it only takes me about an hour to explain. That's the long version. You guys get the long version. I have to explain it much shorter.
Perfect.
Other times.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple days.